Life is a quest for logic and reason. It is a quest to find balance between science and faith. Life is a quest for knowledge and understanding. But most importantly, it's a quest for personal discovery. Whatever your quest, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Welcome to Quest. Hi, Michael. Welcome to the Quest podcast.
Hey, Todd. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
So excited to be here.
Well, I've been saying this at the beginning of all of these recent episodes is that I'm on the way to the 100th episode of the Quest podcast. And I believe you are, well, I'm looking on my iPad, right? You're 4 episodes away from episode 100. So you're in that final 10 that I'm doing. So I'm happy to have you on because you're one of my oldest friends.
That's right. That's right. I'm grateful for our long and adventurous friendship. We've been through a lot of chapters together.
For sure. Actually, you might be my oldest friend. You know, thinking on it, you might be one of my oldest friends. You go back further than probably anyone in my circle. And I can't believe it's taken 6 seasons to get you on this podcast, but you're sort of in the background for a lot of things. And I'm grateful that you could take the time today to come on and chat.
Well, I'm grateful too, Todd. I certainly am grateful for our long friendship, and I'm excited that you've invited me on. I'm excited to talk about whatever we're going to talk about.
Yeah, well, let's get started. Tell the audience a little bit about what you do today, kind of your involvement in businesses in Colorado, and just a little bit around your job, your day-to-day.
Yeah, as you know better than anybody, I've had a long and varied career, but for the last 10 years, I've been pretty focused on an idea called economic resiliency. And having moved to a small town 20 years ago, raised my family in a small town, and tried to start a few businesses in a small town, I am keenly aware of the challenges that small businesses face in small communities. And I ran across a quote about, 10 years ago by AOL's founder and CEO, Steve Case, who said, "Great ideas can start anywhere." And Steve Case, if you know anything about him, is one of the most famous venture capitalists, but he's been focused on what they call second-tier cities. So he doesn't go after supporting businesses in Boston or New York. It's Cleveland, it's Colorado Springs, it's places that typically aren't as attractive to the some of the bigger, sexier businesses. But he's made a fortune supporting businesses in these small communities. So I felt compelled to try to extend that mission to small communities, especially in this digital age we live in, where people work remotely, that it would be an opportunity for us to, build these enterprises, global enterprises from a small town. And I think we feel lucky that that's actually what's happened. We, going back a little bit further, as you know, I started an outdoor adventure company, which took off right after the recession in 08-09. And, our model was, save money on your vacation. You can go to Disneyland and spend this much money, or you can come to the mountains of Colorado and spend half that and even have a better time. And that marketing plan worked quite well. And we quickly grew to become a $5 million business after expanding into other destination communities in Colorado. And on the heels of that, I felt compelled to create a resource that would be there for all rural communities in Colorado, what they call a business incubator. And we went out to identify promising businesses. We created a venture capital arm that was able to raise money for some of these startups. And we embarked on a long and a bit of a scary journey, trying to identify promising companies in our area and providing them the capital, the resources, and the advice that they needed to either launch or scale. And to date, we've raised about $25 million for 26 companies, and that's translated into 137 full-time jobs.
Wow!
And probably 12 rural communities on the western slope of Colorado.
And just to touch on, like, what types of businesses are we talking about? Are these like restaurants? Are these industrial type of of businesses? Are they educational? Like, what types of businesses have benefited from this?
That's a great question. I mean, I think one of the challenges we noticed, and at the heart of this idea of economic resiliency, is diversification of your local economy. And most of these mountain towns rely on tourism, construction, and healthcare. And that's it. That's the bedrock. And of course, when COVID-19 happened, or going back further, the recession, it gutted these communities because construction and tourism, two of the bedrocks, were depleted. So we thought if we could slowly introduce advanced manufacturing, and even some green energy plays, that we would help to diversify the economy in such a way that if an economic downturn did happen, these other industries would be there to support the community. So in that spirit of that, we've actually been very successful with tech. In fact, COVENTURE, which is the home office in the Roaring Fork Valley, we've got a bit of a mini Silicon Valley. We've got two businesses in there that have been recently valued at almost $1 billion.
Wow.
Yeah, we've got probably 5 other tech companies that call the rural Colorado their home base, but have branches all over the world, and they range from 12 million to 50 million. And then I think we've moved beyond just tourism and hospitality into gear manufacturing. We haven't been able to do as much advanced manufacturing as we hoped, but one of our big wins in the last 2 years was Revel Bikes, which was recently nominated for best mountain bike. Actually, it's been nominated for best mountain bike on the planet for the last 3-4 years in a row.
Wow.
But this was a company that it was running at $2 million revenue, and after we were able to provide some capital, some coaching, and resources, they're now at like $15 million, and are looking to expand their enterprise to outside of the United States.
That's incredible.
Yeah, we're proud of them.
I love all the stuff you're doing in the business world, and but we didn't meet that way.
No, we didn't.
Let's go back in time. Do you remember, and I've always wanted to ask you this, if you remember this, because I sort of remember how I got involved with this. Do you remember how we met, or the day we met? Do you even remember? Like, I know we were on the same movie together, but like, do you actually remember the day we met or the first time we talked?
Well, this is my memory, is that I was producing a grad student film, To Dance with a Witch, as you remember, through UCLA. And as the producer, I was tasked with the job of hiring the crew and even the cast. And as I was going through a long, extensive interview process, you responded to an ad, or you responded to some kind of posting, and invited you down to my house in Venice to have a chat. And I think you were certainly the longest chat. I believe everybody else was like a 15-20 minute chat. And I think you and I spoke for 2 or 3 hours, and it was sort of an instant connection. And I think you were maybe one of 2 people that I offered the job to on the spot. Yeah. And I feel lucky I did that, because, we became immediate friends. And when you'd come down to work on the film, you'd often crash at the house in Venice.
Yep.
Which, as you remember, was a bit of a quirky place.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's almost exactly right how I remember it. I remember our first actual meeting being on the set, though, but I could be wrong on that. I could have, we might have met somewhere before that, because that was all kind of a blur. I remember. But I will tell the audience that this is so long ago. Yeah. This was pre-internet, pre-email. I had been living in California 2 weeks, and I went down to LA. I was in Ventura County, which is about an hour north of LA. And I went down to Hollywood to kind of do the touristy thing. And at that time, in the early 90s, 1991, this was, there were still a lot of newsstands, like literally newsstands on every corner. And all the magazines were there, books, all these things. But there were these trade magazines, industry magazines that I had never seen before. Hollywood Reporter, Daily Variety, Backstage. And I was like, this is so cool. So I bought them all and took them home. They were just periodicals. Like, most of them came out daily. And I remember in the back of of drama. It was Dramalog magazine. Dramalog became Backstage, but at the time there was Dramalog magazine and Backstage magazine, and they were casting papers. So I remember buying the Dramalog, and in the back of it, it would have castings people were looking for, and it would have crew positions people were looking for. And I remember there was the UCLA film and a USC film. I hand wrote out a letter. I mean, that's the only way you could do it those days. I hand wrote out a letter, and I said, I've got no experience, but I'll haul cables, fetch coffee, whatever you want me to do. And then you called me, and then you had me come down.
Yeah.
And then I got on the movie. And I remember my first day on the set, we were like painting castle walls and things, like making things look antique and all of that. And I caught the bug. And I'd only been out there 2 weeks. People have spent like their whole lives in California trying to get on movies. I was out there 2 weeks and I got on my first movie.
Well, as you remember, I called it a student film, but it felt like a legitimate feature film. In fact, it eventually did become a feature film once we figured out a way to extend it beyond its hour run rate. But, it was a historical drama. And of course, we're doing all the location scouting that needed to be done. Fortunately, because we were in LA County, there were a number of places we could piggyback on at a low cost. As you remember, Sam Raimi's castle, Sam Raimi
Army of Darkness. Yep.
Yeah, Army of Darkness and Spider-Man fame. We were able to use that location. And then, as you remember, like a lot of the crew were rock stars, like people that had plenty of street cred. We'd done lots. Our cinematographer was well established. Our script supervisor was well established, and went on to great acclaim working with Steven Spielberg. And we even had some crew members that were, kind of on the brink of breaking in. So I think I was grateful that we had that first experience, which was, you couldn't ask for a better film experience. Talk about like learning on the job. Like, you got your master's in film on that movie. So did I, really.
Oh yeah. That was insane working on that. It was like the most amazing experience. And I remember working in any department I could. There were days when you were sending me to get food, because I was basically a production assistant on it. I wasn't anything special, but you'd send me to get food, or I'd be going to get photocopies. One day they dressed me up in tights and a tunic and a sword, and they had me act in it.
That's right.
You remember that day?
Yeah, you were cast and crew.
And I was holding a boom pole, worked in sound, worked with Faith in script supervision. And I was just like, guys, whoever needs help, I'm your guy, because this was going to be the quickest. Because I think to be a great producer, you don't have to master a given department, but you have to understand every department, And I knew if to go to the top, that I need to know all these departments. Like, I needed to kind of have an idea of how lighting and sound and all this stuff works, even if I'm not like, a good DP, a good director of photography needs to do it every day, 10 hours a day, 60 hours a week to be the greatest DP that there is. And that's all they do. Yeah. And they keep up on all that tech, all the new advancements and all this stuff. Well, I didn't want to just like do one thing like that. So I was hungry to get involved in every department that I could and learn as much as I could.
To be faithful to the experience, we probably need to go back to the credits and add your name to all credits. Services.
Yeah, right.
Location scouting, script supervisor.
It was transportation. I drove people out in the desert, it was like anything that could be done. I pretty much worked in all those departments. And and we could spend an hour just telling stories about that short film. But we worked on something after that. I think you were so impressed with me.
Yeah, you were my first phone call.
Yeah. You and so tell everyone about the docudrama that you worked on next. And I was lucky enough to be involved with you on that.
Yeah, Young at Heart's sort of, from a production standpoint, far easier of a production, but this one was already slated to be a film festival darling, and we knew it was going to be a feature film, and we were lucky to have some of the key positions already in place. But I think in that particular shooting, you were kind of elevated to more of a production manager, and you were pretty much my right-hand man throughout the whole experience. And it was kind of a remarkable tale. And I think in the end, we discovered we had sort of stumbled and maybe even started a whole new genre, docudrama, which now is pretty commonplace. But back then, the idea started with these 8 women who play a card game called Pan, and it's poker. And these 8 Jewish women in their 80s were just remarkable. 2 of them had survived the Holocaust. The other 6 all had crazy stories, and they were all good friends. And we found a way to sort of tell their life stories through vignettes out of the card game, and that the card game would actually become almost a metaphor for their life.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty special that we got a chance to meet these ladies, and I think we tried casting. I don't know if you remember this. We tried seeing if we could find women to play these women. And in the end, it's like, this is crazy. We'll just have these women reenact certain moments in their life, and it worked.
And they did
really
great.
Well.
I remember some of the stories of the women. One of them had been on the Gong Show. I remember her Gong Show trophy that was on in her house. One of the women had, and I'm probably going to mistell the story. One of the women had gotten married, and on her honeymoon, her husband had gotten beaten nearly to death and had lost his memory, and she was still married to him decades later, and he had no recollection of her. Do you remember that story?
Oh my gosh,
that was powerful.
Yeah. And I think it was a little bit challenging because we knew we had all these great short stories, and it was like, how can we tie them together and to a unified thread?
And the drama was we killed one of them off.
not really.
We fictitiously killed one of them off to make it.
That's right. That's the thing. That's where the drama comes in. But yeah, we had one of them. And you're absolutely right. Like that's how we created a kind of an important, a critical plot point that provided a lift for all of their individual stories.
Yeah, really, the docudrama reality show thing, the lines are blurred, and that's what they do. Reality shows are very scripted. So that's what we were doing, is kind of documenting a reality show. Like, no one calls things documentaries anymore. They're just reality shows, Yeah. We kind of had a reality show.
And historically, I think the whole world would admit that Real World on MTV was the first reality show, and we preceded that. So we came out. And ironically, and I don't know if I told you this, that one of the producers I'm not saying that we inspired that, but one of the producers on The Real World was a friend, and he went to the screening of the film and was really impressed. And I like to think that maybe we had some impact on where they ended up going.
For sure. If that was done today, it would be 8 80-year-old women that have been friends their whole lives as 8 episodes on Netflix. And it would be a reality show today, because you'd have more time to spend with their backstories before we get to the funeral.
Yeah.
One interesting.
If you remember, like that, I mean, it worked. It was a small sleeper hit, but it went to all 6 of the major film festivals: Berlin, Toronto, Sundance,
Venice,
Cannes, and Venice. It went to all 6, and then it had a small theatrical release. 38, or maybe it was 54 small theaters around the United States. But hey, it happened.
An interesting thing happened while making that docudrama, and that was the LA riots happened.
That's right.
Which, in a way, fell into our lap as a happy accident.
Yeah.
And it was weird. One of the women in the show had been in the Watts riots.
That's right.
And it became a whole new plot point. And what was really interesting about this was when the LA riots happened, all the film permits were pulled. Like, no one was working. And our group sent out people illegally to shoot.
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
Yeah. And some of those people landed amazing jobs. They were all public access trained professionals. But I think at least 4, if not 5 of them landed full-time jobs with CNN.
This was shot on film. Do you remember, was it 35 millimeter or was it 16?
35.
Yeah, I believe we were the only people to get 35 millimeter film footage of the LA riots. And I have since seen some of that footage in different things. Like CNN ran they do their decades thing. Like, some of our footage was in that. And Showtime made an original miniseries called Riot, which was 4 intersecting stories that happened during the LA riots. It was all fictitious, and Luke Perry was the lead actor in it, playing a cop. And our footage was also in that as stock footage. So I don't know if you ever got paid for that, Mike, or not, but
yeah, we were young guns in our 20s, and I think we probably weren't as smart as we should have been around contracts and making sure that our interests were protected. Of course, Now we know too much about that stuff, but back then we were naive.
You were working as a teacher while you were working yourself into Hollywood, and you were a teacher at Crenshaw High School, which is like in inner city LA. I remember I went to go visit you once at the high school, and it had like razor wire around the top of the chain link fences. Yeah. What was that experience like?
Yeah, at that time, that was the inner city high school. And I knew nothing. I had grown up in a mountain town in Colorado, went to a small college in Iowa, and LA was my first city experience. So I remember walking in the door at Crenshaw, and at the time, like 80% of the school population was African American, and the other 20% was Latino. But they were great kids. I think a lot of people heard these horror stories, and those stories were true in terms of that was ground zero for a lot of gang violence. Crips and Bloods, where there was some incident that happened almost monthly, and often more than once a month. But fortunately, the school was protected by a fence, and most of those incidents were kept out of the school. But I did have a few incidents, you may remember, where I was working late at the school. I coached the baseball team, and I was leaving late, 8:00 at night, and had a few scary run-ins with gangs.
Before we move on here, you mentioned the house in Venice. And, I spent a couple of days there. It was like a great place, and always people coming through there. And as you remember, I didn't sleep there because I don't sleep.
That's right.
And I met so many cool people there. But tell everyone a little bit about kind of the historical significance of that house and the signatures that were up in the attic and things like that.
Yeah. So it was an old Victorian style house, 1 block off of Venice Beach. So you could easily walk out at any time of day and see all these crazy street performers. Several of those street performers actually went on to national acclaim. One actually was signed to Geffen Records and won an Emmy. I'm sorry, won a
Grammy.
Grammy, yeah. So that was one side of it. And then, of course, inside the house, especially in the fireplace in the attic, there were all these signatures, which included all the members of the Doors, Jim Morrison in particular. And I think we just thought, people were, just writing their names on it or other people's names, and didn't matter. Of course, flash forward after I left LA and moved to Portland. On my second day in Portland, when I walked in the DMV to get my license, the lady at the DMV, who was in a tie-dye t-shirt, looked at the address. She goes, "Oh my gosh, we used to party there all the time back in my 20s and 30s. And she said, "Do you know that's the Doors, like, hung out there all the time? We thought maybe they even lived there for a while." And I said, "All right, that's unbelievable, because their names were on the fireplace." And she says, "Oh yeah, Jim Morrison, he was in that house as much as any house."
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That's incredible. You mentioned moving to Portland. I think, all of us, we see the dark side of the business. Hollywood is an ugly, dirty industry. And you experience some of that, because especially on the executive level of working on these shows, it's bad enough to be on the creative end and to butt heads with people over money and things like that, your artistic vision, but to be on the business side of it, where money is on the line, people get wicked with each other and things get soured. And you were on the receiving end of some deals that soured with you and people that you kind of butted heads with. And ultimately you decided that Hollywood wasn't for you and you moved up to Portland. And I want to talk about kind of your journey in the Pacific Northwest, but I want to just sort of and feel free to jump in and say whatever you want about it. But it's Hollywood is a weird thing for me when I look back on it, because I did spend a little bit more time in it than you did in LA. And then I did some other stuff on my own, and it's a treacherous business. And it's a weird thing for me when I still stumble over how to describe it. I feel that the Hollywood industry is a good and decent public service, because most people in the world live paycheck to paycheck. They don't have great lives. They live in what I always call ordinary misery, and they need to watch a movie to forget about their problems. And they need to watch their favorite TV show. And we've all binge watched things when we were going through bad places in our lives. And people need to read books and listen to music. You can forget about your problems when you listen to a Taylor Swift album for an hour, or whatever. So I feel like entertainment is very incredibly important, but one of the ugliest, most toxic businesses there is. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I think one of the reasons we're such good friends is that we both were from out of state. I think we both kind of grew up in more of a community-based environment, and that's what we stood. That's what we understood, and I think that's what we tried to bring to the table is that we're both community builders. And I think despite our best efforts to really create a family out of the production team or sort of create a family feel in the neighborhoods we lived in, that at the end of the day, there's always a sense that wherever you were, people were looking over your shoulder to see if there's someone more important in the room. And I think in the end, like my assessment was that you just can't find true community in Hollywood, and you just
You're right.
And I think, your reference to some of the tough things I dealt with was, I think financially had to sort of make a change, had to leave town because there comes a point where I was so financially strapped from helping finance these movies that I needed to go someplace and get my head straight and make some money back.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's bad. That part's bad enough, right? Like the money, but to have, people that you butt heads with, toxic personalities you have to work with. It's like, why keep doing this? And you're right. People will always looking over your shoulder, looking for someone better. They want to defy its division and destruction in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Like really, I saw best friends that had known each other for years since they were little kids screw each other over for a job.
Yeah.
That's how bad Hollywood is. People will just betray a lifelong friend for a job to get an acting job. It's nuts. It's nuts. Now, when you moved up to Portland, this was sort of like the gray period for us. I was doing stuff. You were doing that. We were together in Colorado earlier this year, and you had to like fill me in on what went on in Portland because I didn't have any recollection of your time in Portland. And I was like, man, we really didn't talk much while you were there. But tell everyone kind of what you got into while you were up there.
Those few years I was there, honestly, was an opportunity for me to heal my soul and discover a balanced life. Because you know how it was in LA. Like both of us were working crazy weeks. Like there were 100-hour weeks. There's only 178 hours in a week, but there were several weeks, especially when we're in the thick of it, where I was, got my teaching job. I had another sort of side job, and then I'm making movies all the time.
Yeah,
and that's a lot of time and energy. So I think time and energy manage in high stress environments, managing people, dealing with difficult situations that require immediate solutions. It's one of the more, if not the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life. And I think we both learned a lot from that. And I think it's definitely finally paid off in the end for us because we
couldn't be doing what we're doing now without having that kind of pressure.
That's right. Yeah, I think we've both become consummate problem solvers, which is at the end of the day maybe the number one requirement of any executive level job. And we didn't have a choice, So I think going to Portland for me was getting back to nature, which having grown up in the mountains of Colorado was really important to me. And as you know, there's a whole other chapter in my life where I was always really keenly interested in the outdoors and developing a high level of skill around mountaineering in particular. But I worked for an outdoor organization called Knowles. I mean, I had again a job in education, but it was a great job because I had a chance to start. I got kind of.
And Knowles is the National Outdoor Leadership School.
Yeah, they were called the Harvard of Outdoor Education. Almost anybody who's risen up the ranks and has become a well-known mountaineer, from Ed Shears, who was the first American to summit all 8,000 meter peaks, to most recently Jimmy Chin, who's won 2 Oscars for his movies about the outdoors. And Jimmy actually was on my instructor course, and Jimmy and I are pretty good friends. So it was great to rub shoulders with people at that level, and great to get my skills dialed, and great to have these few years in my life where I was, for at least 3 months out of the year, I was off doing expeditions, Patagonia, Alaska, Pacific Northwest.
At Knowles, like this is one of these places where they, teach you things like dropping you in the middle of nowhere in the woods and survival techniques. And that's kind of what they do too, right?
Yeah. I mean,
firemen learn to do things out there, and special forces people learn to do, like, it's that big.
It's all about progressive skills. And, again, the standard course, the bread and butter course, is 30 days. And so I think any student who takes it acquires a high level of skills. The goal is to be able to travel and live safely and comfortably in harsh environments, which sounds like an oxymoron, but it's true. Like I got to a place, not only having gone through the courses myself, but having been an instructor for several years, where I could go anywhere and feel comfortable. I did a crazy expedition in Alaska, linking together some first ascents and some of the lesser known peaks, but in the Denali mountain range. And 5 years ago, during the time in LA, I think the hardest thing I'd ever done was, like an overnight mountain trip or rock climbing trip. So flash forward, all of a sudden, I'm jetting around the world, and I was getting offers. This is actually the part where I started to connect the dots. So towards the end of my time, I had a friend, Todd Fischer, who you met. He was he was one of the pioneers of what was it called? The Apple editing software.
Right. Final Cut Pro?
Final Cut Pro, yeah. He was one of the pioneers of that, and he was an Apple-sponsored editor. And he got tagged to do a bunch of projects for National Geographic, and he reached out to me for a couple of those, and I helped him on the project where they relocated a killer whale based on an aquarium just off the coast of the Pacific Northwest back to Iceland. And that was incredible to be a part of that. And then we did a couple of other National Geo projects.
When you were out there, I might be wrong, I might be blurring the lines with someone else's story, but IMAX was just coming into existence when you were at Knowles.
That's right.
And if anybody remembers, the original IMAX experiences were usually in natural history museums in your city, had the IMAX theaters. Those were the first people to get them. And the first IMAX movies were nature-based ones, like on mountainsides and stuff.
Right.
Were you next to that at all? Because I thought I remembered you telling me about IMAX before anyone knew about IMAX.
Absolutely. So Ed Brashears, again, a Knowles graduate, who one of the most famous, actually, I think the most popular IMAX film of all time was his journey up the 14ers. And Ed Vistiers, who was the first guy to climb those 14ers, all 8,000 meter peaks like that. And that was the time just after all those people had died, which was chronicled in Krakauer's Into Thin Air. And ironically, I had been up to Everest with Mark Fisher, who was one of the guides who died on Everest. And we got some great footage at base camp, or I got some great footage at base camp, which was later used in that IMAX film.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was great. It was great and this time it wasn't forced. Like before, I was just grinding, like you, I was grinding. And now I was getting phone calls from Nat Geo or Discovery Channel because I was one of the few people who had filmmaking background, and I had superb outdoor experience and was able to kind of handle a camera in harsh environments.
That's incredible. Later on, when we eventually kind of reconnected, our lives crossed paths again, I remember you showing me a business plan for mycreativity.com.
That's
and
right.
I think it's been so fascinating to me because, like, your involvement with that, I think, Jared Paul listed the education station. Maybe you had some involvement with that. Yeah. I think we can talk about that a bit. But I think what's really interesting is to be around these things at the cusp of kind of their birth into the world, like to be one of the first people around those first IMAX movies, to be around what mycreativity.com didn't get off the ground because it was too ahead of its time.
Yeah.
It couldn't be done. And you talk a little bit about what you remember of mycreativity.com.
Well, what's interesting is that was just when the tech bubble was being created. So going back, I think tech bubble burst in 2002. So My Creativity was in 1999, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there were already these crazy stories of these young guns getting, millions of dollars to build their technology enterprise, and it was like the Wild West. And My Creativity kind of jumped into that fray. they were trying to be a portal for all creatives, chefs, print artists, journalists,
photographers, filmmakers, writers.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, Todd, the irony, and you know this all too well, is that the masterclass platform, which is valued at well over $1 billion, was essentially my creativity.
Mm-hmm, it was.
I've always been curious, because the idea is that we would find these masters in their respective professions, and they would be the ones offering the class.
And that was Spielberg, Stephen King. It was like Annie Leibovitz. Like, it was the top people offering these master classes.
And we had probably 24, I would call them Class A people that had global recognition. And I think, we were well poised to grow. And it just didn't quite resonate at the time. We had a good team.
What didn't work about it was how it needed to be delivered, because almost all of America was still on dial-up, and there was you couldn't have. How was Spielberg going to teach the class? Yeah. Typing on a blog? Who wants to see that? Like, everything that was built there, it was built for hoped for technology that we really wouldn't see roll out until well into the 2000s. Yeah. And it was ahead of its time. And what I think is fascinating about it is we have seen this replicated today with the master classes. It works, huge industry. Yeah. But what I think is really interesting about like our paths is how we've assembled this giant jigsaw puzzle that needed to have certain skills to build it. And it's like, wow, the Hollywood stuff really kind of worked with the educational stuff. And then that sort of worked with the outdoor leadership stuff. And then then you started to gain some more business end of things in the tech world. Like, you kept assembling your own jigsaw puzzle with all of these skills that could be interconnected. And I think there's a great synergy to that when we live our lives, how the next thing helps the next thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think you and I have talked about this a bunch, and I think this might be quite applicable for your audience, is that you don't have to have a straight line. And oftentimes the curved line is much more beneficial in terms of developing core skills that can translate across multiple fields. And I look at my friends who started out as lawyers or doctors or accountants, and kind of stayed the course and have done pretty successful things. But to be an entrepreneur, you have to be in the trenches. Like, you can't just call yourself an entrepreneur. You have to just get out there, try things on, become a consummate problem solver, learn how to be resilient, work under stress, be able to manage people, not just manage people, but learn how to be a leader. I think that's something you and I both kind of went through the school of hard knocks to figure out, like, how do you build culture around a film or a business or an enterprise that's meant to bring in change? And how do you build culture, especially at the onset? Like you said, we were at the beginning. We just sort of stumbled into the beginning of certain trends where things weren't defined, and we had to help define it.
You're right about building corporate cultures. There are corporate cultures. People that are employed at Apple are much different than the people employed at Microsoft, and the people, like Wendy's people don't go to McDonald's. Like, there's corporate cultures everywhere you go, and to build a culture, there has to be a leader to build the culture. You got to build a bubble and inhabit it with people that you want to work with. And I think, and no disrespect to like what a doctor goes through, but those straight line plans are 100-step plans. This is what you do when you're in middle school and high school. Start taking the sciences. Have good grades, get a good GPA, get into a good school, get your 4-year degree, then start to get your advanced degree, and then you're getting a residency over here and intern over here, and all these things to get to your 100-step plan. Everyone goes through the same 100-step plan to get to their private practice at the end of the. But what we do is a 1,000-step plan with several 100-step plans. Yeah. I feel like, it's I think a little different in terms of how you have to work toward building an entrepreneur, because sometimes a doctor can just show up and operate that day, or have, 6 appointments with people and it's the same checkup. And there's some mechanics to their jobs that makes it, this is what I do every day. This is what I show up and I do every day. And, but with entrepreneurship, you're not just necessarily a button puncher or customer service or, tech over here, or, leading it here or doing the marketing here. Like you're doing all those things. It's like making the movie. You're producing. An entrepreneur, you got to have those producer chops to be able to do it, because you have to know every department or your company will fail.
Right. I mean, there's so many things in play, and I think we've, for better or for worse, because we've lived so much of it, it's just sort of in our natures now that, okay, well, anything could happen today. There's market forces that could happen that would undermine everything. There's competition, which is nipping at our heels, which one false move and all of a sudden we're behind the competition. There's
a pandemic.
Yeah, exactly.
Who was prepared for that?
Yeah. So you just never know. And I think you can't help but be on your toes at all times and always be looking around the corner, like what's coming next. And that, honestly, I've done a pretty good job of that, but that's one of your sweet spots, man. You have been able to look down the road. And I even remember back when we were in LA, and certainly all those years we've hung out, like you saw the future much better than I did. And I think had you not done what you've done, you would have been a great, what do they call them? Soothsayer, or the people that predict the future.
Yeah.
I'd say that you're batting about 700, maybe 800 as far as your future predictions. I think back on all the things you said, like this is what's going to happen. It's like, yep, Todd was right.
That's a great compliment. It's a curse yet a gift, Michael.
Yeah.
What do you remember about Education Station and Jared Paulus?
Again, just one of these crazy times in life where you're sort of working with and rubbing shoulders with someone who's going to go on to great things. But, again, out of that tech bubble, there was a lot of carnage, and my creativity was limited carnage because we never, like you said, the platform was too early for its
never really got past the business plan, right?
Right. We did raise some money, but not enough to really launch it. And then, meanwhile, you've got people like Jared Paulus, who's our current governor in Colorado, and who got his start in education as a board member at the Colorado Board of Education, which I ran the Department of Innovation over there for several years, and worked closely with him around a number of great ideas that I think were transformative for how technology could support schools. Mm-hmm. But Jared's story is kind of interesting because at a time he was the richest 20-year-old in the world. He had sold 2 companies before he graduated from college, was worth about $30 million. And just for giggles, he took his parents' greeting card company, put it online, called the Blue Mountain Arts. And during a time when there was like a top 10 list every day, every week, next to Yahoo and Google and all these other well-known sites, was Blue Mountain Arts. It was in the top 5 consistently. And it never
generated. You could send an electronic greeting card is what you could do. You could send a birthday card in an email.
And it was all free. And so for a company that didn't generate any revenue, much like a lot of these companies, they were able to still establish these crazy values on future revenue possibilities. That just the fact that this site was successful at gathering so much traffic, was able to gather data on these people. Like, these were the early years way before people even thought that Big Brother was possible, that these sort of companies were gathering data, aggregating that data, and then selling it to larger companies for marketing purposes. But he sold just before the bubble burst. He might be the greatest story of getting out at the right time, because he sold to Excite.com, which at the time was as big as Yahoo, mm-hmm. for $800 million, $600 million of which was cash. So many of those entrepreneurs that went bust during the tech bubble burst was because all of their earnings were in stock.
Yeah.
But Jared was smart enough to get out while the getting was good. Ironically, maybe a year and a half after his company was bought, Excite was sold for the exact same amount of money as what they paid Jared for.
And Yahoo bought him, right?
Yahoo bought him for $800 million. Mm-hmm. So, and there was a time when they were valued at like $5, $6, $7 billion.
Wow. Wow.
But
That's insane.
Well, on the heels of that, you're 22, 23 years old and you're worth $300-400 million. What do you do? And he decided to jump in the political arena, and felt lucky to sort of work with him at the Department of Education. And we build these education, part of, one of the many technology innovations he did. He started a nonprofit. We created these education stations, like these mobile labs that would go to schools and provide computer training.
They were in buses, right? Am I right that they were in buses, and it was the most advanced technology available? Were there touch screens then? I can't remember.
Yeah. He I was primarily involved in the software development side of things, but he, given all his connections, he was definitely able to pull in some next generation laptops that weren't really even available to the open market.
People don't understand that, like, actually touchscreen technology has been around since the late 70s, but it took a really long time for it to make it to the consumer, because so many of the big companies that develop things like this want the technology paid for before it goes out to the consumer. So touchscreens were being used in a number of markets before the public ever got them.
Yeah.
And of course, like, I think when Steve Jobs kind of popularized it with everything that was Apple, he was really the first person to really put it out there and make it accessible to people, even before touchscreens were on our tablets or our laptops or anything. He was kind of the first to put it out there, because the technology was finally paid for and they could license it and they could put it out. Those weren't things that Apple developed. They still got it from other companies like Silicon Graphics and other businesses that were around long before, but they did actually make it better. Early touchscreen technology was really difficult to use. It was almost like you were trying to press a button on the screen. Like, it was really difficult I think what Apple's people did was really revolutionize how easy it would work, and such a soft tip from the finger could do so much. Yeah. So of course, look where it's come. But yeah, I remember some of that stuff in those buses. And if you just kind of moving on, like, if you hadn't done enough at this point, you also got involved in publishing, and you published an art book for a very famous fantasy artist, Larry Elmore, good friend of mine. And he had never put out a coffee table book of his art, and you published his 20 years of Elmore art book, which was super cool.
Well, it's interesting, Todd, because I think at the end of my time with the Department of Education, I really was getting the itch to get back into the creative space. As much as I had sworn off filmmaking, I think it was still very much inside me, and I was looking to do something creative. And publishing sort of bubbled to the surface because it was just less intense. You weren't managing people in-house, you were outsourcing to these experts, and you could sort of hang your shingle and be a one-person show and just outsource parts of the puzzle to experts. And then the timeline was always just a couple months, 3 months max. So that was a great experience. I look back with a lot of fondness on that publishing, and honestly, I learned a lot from you during that time. And I think we both have kind of kept our finger in that pot, just because I do think we both enjoy it. I mean, I think there's obviously it can be lucrative, but I do think it's pretty close to both of our hearts.
I wonder, the secret sauce for perseverance, because both of us had, companies that succeeded, companies that failed. Both of us had personality conflicts with different people. Even with the Elmore book, I had a personality conflict with another partner in it, and I was out. You guys kept winning and put the book out. So, like, this stuff happens, right? Like, we get it. Neither of us fell into any serious drug problems in Hollywood or any scandals or anything like that. Like, and we're still here. What do you think the secret to perseverance is? Because we've seen so many people just one failure, one bad review, and they're like, I'm done. Like, they can't even take it. They just fold. Why are we still here?
Well, I tell you, Todd, I think there's probably a secret recipe out there, and that is the exact recipe. And, my perspective is a smaller one, but I will tell you that having good friends by your side and good friends who know the terrain I would put that at the number one spot. And I don't know if I could have done all these things without having a friend like you. a small handful of others that I could use to pick their brain. And you have the team you're managing, but you've got to have those counselors on the outside, those mentors that you can go to and can help you through tough times, who have the experience and the insight and the skill set to sort of navigate some really challenging stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that was always one of my challenges. I tried to be a lone wolf too often. And I think it's only been in the last 10 years that I'm better about, okay, this is a tough one. I'm not going to live in my head and think this is the perfect solution. I need to call Todd. I need to call a few other people to work this out and come up with a better solution.
Yeah, I think building a bubble and inhabiting it with good people and recognizing who those people are is critical. My worst failure happened, year 2000, my 30th birthday, like literally that whole time, year 2000, 30th birthday, bad relationship, company collapse. Like it all couldn't have been, like, I'm pretty sure I had a nervous breakdown. Clinically, I don't know if I had a nervous breakdown. I'm pretty sure I did. And I didn't know if I could come back, much less ever do anything in entertainment again. I felt like my corporate shield was just destroyed. I had nothing. Like, you could have just said, "Hi, Todd," and I would have cried. Like it was that bad off. But then 6 months later, and also physically, I was like physically destroyed too. Like I had all kinds of like health problems from all that stress. But 6 months later, I started a dance education company, which became my most successful business. It was a nonprofit, a completely different direction. And I rebuilt myself, but it was weird because, that company that died in year 2000, I trusted all those lieutenants, and I chose wrong. I chose poorly, as they would say in Indiana Jones movie. And I never made that mistake again. I knew how to like witness the people that were around me and figure out who was right, who was temp that would go and who were the people that would become the future lieutenants or captains of your businesses. Yeah. And now I'm much better at identifying that. And this is just stuff that you identify as you move along and get experience. But unfortunately, too many people they quit. I tried to make a book, it didn't work, and it's, try to write some music, it didn't work. Well, why? You can write some more music, Yeah.
Well,
one business. Go ahead.
Part of the learning curve is just identifying red flags. And there are those people out there that are charming as all get out, but if you trust them with too much, like they can suck you dry. I think for both of us, we've had to spend some time not only shedding our lives of those toxic people that are, just drains on a project, but also just being better at identifying and just being better at due diligence and being better at drawing boundaries. Like those are all also part of the recipe, right? That you've got to develop a certain executive mindset that allows you to pick good people and allows you to draw boundaries and kind of have clear mandates and expectations and being able to walk away. Honestly, I think better than anybody. Like my Achilles heel is I can't walk away. And I could be on a sinking ship and everybody has jumped off the ship. And there is some truth to the idea that if you're going to fail fast. I think you and I both, we stayed on the ship far longer than we should have. And I think some of our more challenging moments in our life is because we just felt like it was our duty to stay on the ship.
And my kryptonite was always entertainment, Hollywood. Like that was my kryptonite, wanting to go back to it, try to make another movie or do this. And it was just, at a certain point, it was like, it's the same thing again, and in the same crapshoot, whether people will like this stuff. And I knew I would never be able to write my Metacomics books if I didn't just make a hard stop. So I remember I was going to exit ever doing anything in entertainment again. And a friend of mine called me and said, "You've never really done any acting. Do you want to come to Atlanta and do that?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yeah, right. Why not?" I'm in this in-between phase of beginning to write the first Metacomics book. And I went down there and I did a bunch of acting jobs. And it was like the perfect cherry on top because I got to work on these huge budget movies, Marvel movies, Godzilla movies, all of this stuff, these enormous budgets. It was the easiest job there was. I didn't have to memorize scripts. I'd have one line to say in a hospital drama. And I did that for a little bit of time. And I was like, number one, I should have been doing this the whole time because those that know me, I'm a huge nerd. So it was like doctor, teacher, scientist. That's all I played. That's all I booked. And I was like, this is it. This is the way to go out without having a bad, bitter taste in my mouth. And then I moved to New York. I wrote the first Metatomics book. And although I still keep my eye on entertainment and I wouldn't turn down a small acting job that just had me on another Godzilla movie for 30 days, which I'm technically contractually obligated to do because my character's not dead yet. It's nice. I keep my toe in the pool, but I'm not working in it. It's not my community anymore. And now I've assembled this new bubble with new stuff and people that I want to be around, the Crown Management Group and our friend Anthony. We'll name drop him here. I mean, he's got really incredible people with incredible stories. And so many of those guests have been on this Quest podcast. And I want to be around those people that have done great things. Yeah. That's my bubble.
Now, that bit of wisdom has really resonated with me in the last year. I mean, as you well know, I think I'm in the process of shedding my life from all these endeavors, and certainly extricating yourself from businesses takes some time. But I think you, whether it was completely intentional or not, I think you have kind of leapfrogged into what should be the final frontier and maybe the most important frontier for everybody. Become a thought leader. Like if you've been in the trenches, if you developed a skill set, if you have that entrepreneurial mindset and are able to, and have been a leader, what's next? Yeah. And I think what's next for both of us is to be a thought leader. And you've already done that. I look at what you've accomplished over the last few years with great admiration, and in many ways, you've kind of become a bit of a North Star for me. It's like, okay, that's where I'm going to. I need to get a little bit clearer on what it is I bring to the table. But I think writing a book that shares wisdom with the world is a wonderful gift, and I'm hoping to move in that direction.
The Metatomics books were the beginning of my third act. That's what it was. But you got to complete the second act. We know how it is in the movie, but you can't get to the third act without the tragedy of the second act there. And kind of encapsulating entertainment and giving it a nice send off needed to happen before I could fully sink myself into what this third act would look like, which is only, 5 years in. There's still a lot to go on it. And I think you're doing the same thing. You're encapsulating that business stuff to prepare for your third act. And I think that's what's truly exciting and where we're at in our lives for those that are listening. And, you and I should check back in 5 years on the Quest podcast and tell everyone how the third act's going.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm certainly grateful for that pearl of wisdom, because I think everybody, hopefully the people that listen to this show will seize on that concept, especially if you're in your middle-aged years and whatever your life journey has been. The third act, as you've told me, should be your best act, could be your best act. Mm-hmm. So why not get crystal clear on what it is that you're good at and what it is you want to share with the world, and do that. Do what's in your heart.
Yep. And use all that experience and all that wisdom. The third act, our best act for sure.
That's right.
We'll check back in on it. Michael, how can people find you out there if they want to learn more about COVENTURE or what you do?
Yeah. So again, COVENTURE is the business incubator. It's coventure.io. We've got all kinds of social. We have a robust social media platform that's linked to the COVENTURE site, and folks can find all about it through that. And even though I'm in the process of moving to the background on that, I think COVENTURE is still a tremendous resource for entrepreneurs and small businesses that are looking to either launch or scale a new enterprise. I would say that's probably the best contact information for me at this point.
I'm trying to get you to go out and speak more. So anybody who wants to hire Michael to talk about his life experiences, you can go to Crown Management and find him there.
That's right.
He has a lot of stories to tell people.
That's right. You can definitely contact me through Crown Management, and Anthony is now working closely with me on a couple of cool projects. I think that my swan song in the entrepreneur world is to kind of merge business concepts with education. So I'm kind of bringing together both worlds, and we have this great career technical education, or what was once known as trade schools. We've got this CTE, Career Technical Education Initiative, that is is remarkable. And we've been successful at raising millions of dollars for it. And we've already finished a 3-year pilot where we've been able to place 85%. We've been able to place a couple hundred kids into jobs in rural communities right out of college, or right out of high school. And after 3 years, there's 85% job retention, which is remarkable.
Wow.
So we've kind of stumbled across a cool plan, and Anthony's going to help us get across the finish line with that plan. And then I would say in the next year or two, it'll be time for me to officially announce what the next thing is. But certainly I am available to, I guess in the spirit of starting on that journey, I'm certainly available to help provide coaching or wisdom or insight into any of the things we talked about today.
And maybe those fans of Metatomics out there, you might see Michael out there on my worldwide tour next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to convince him to come along with me. So
yeah. Well, I guess the last thing I would share on this podcast is just grateful for our long friendship, and it's always great to talk to you, Todd. And
absolutely,
I look forward to kind of linking arms through this third chapter of our lives and kind of being there for us being there for each other in a powerful way.
For
and
sure.
All of your listeners are thinking about that. Like who's my tribe? Who are those people that I'm going to ride this train with to the end?
For sure. Michael, thanks for coming out today. I really appreciate it.
You bet, Todd. It's always a pleasure. Thanks.
We'll talk soon.
Take care.
Metacortex Publishing hopes that you've enjoyed this presentation.
Please take a moment to listen to some other podcast offerings from Metacortex Publishing.
The Danceology podcast interviews the great masters of dance, the working professionals starring in today's most exciting shows, and the rising stars ready to amp up the craft. I'm your host, Edyta Stawinska from Dancing with the Stars. Join me as I dive into the world of dance, uncovering unique stories and the fascinating personalities of industry professionals on Danceology.
Hi, I'm Father Daniel Duplantis, a Catholic priest, martial artist, and host of the Karate Priest podcast. Have you ever wondered what the church teaches about different topics? Are you a martial arts enthusiast or just someone who wants to learn more about martial arts? I'd like to invite you to join me and many guests on my podcast as we cover topics of faith, everyday living, and martial arts on the Karate Priest podcast.
The No Earthly Explanation podcast investigates the things that are unexplainable, hosted by world-renowned investigative researcher Donald R. Schmidt and scientist Ellie Ringo. Follow them as they look for evidence for things that have no earthly explanation. Available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Every year, tennis players from around the world compete for excellence, triumphing against all odds to emerge the champions. I'm your host, Maddie Harrison. Join me as I get up close and personal with these dynamic individuals and find out what it takes to go for greatness. Let's go beyond the match.
Cult Following is a podcast that studies the personalities and common traits of cult leaders and their followers. Get the real story behind these infamous and oftentimes tragic cults from a new perspective, through exhaustive research, and from interviews with people that were there. Available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Hi everybody, I'm Amber Rose, the religious hippie, and I host the podcast A Catholic's Perspective. Join me every 2 weeks as I release episodes targeted towards helping young Catholics navigate their ever-changing secular world while staying strong in their faith. Whether you are a Catholic or not, all are welcome here. So if this is something that interests you, feel free to tune in. You can find A Catholic's Perspective on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. I hope to see you there. Bye!
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to rate and review this episode. This podcast is produced by Todd Fischer and Anthony Smith and is distributed by Metacortex Publishing. This podcast is copyright Any previously trademarked or copyright content is used by permission. Information and opinions stated in this podcast should not be construed as medical advice. Please be sure to visit the official website for Metacortex Publishing at metacortexpublishing.com or find us on social media for other unique content.